Hello, and welcome to this Open Banking Expo live panel debate, the new paradigm in open banking, sponsored by Tribe Payments. I'm Ellie Duncan, Head of Content here at Open Banking Expo. Now, the UK has reached a number of open banking milestones recently, and the open banking implementation entity is nearing the end of its roadmap. There's also been plenty of talk about what comes next in the form of embedded finance. However, there are still some hurdles to overcome in the sense that for many organisations, a lack of resources has prohibited them from adopting open banking, and wider adoption is needed in order to make it truly open. We've brought together a panel comprising representatives from across the open banking ecosystem to discuss what has already been achieved and how to level the playing field to help spark innovation and drive competition in the space. They'll also set out what the future of open banking reform looks like, not just in the UK, but in Europe as well. With that, let me introduce our panelists. Joining me today is Alex Reddish, Chief Commercial Officer at Tribe Payments, Anna Clementi, Head of Open Banking at BBVA, Jason Maud, Chief Technology Advocate at Starling Bank, Lana Tahirli Abdulieva, MD of Strategy at CB Group and Founding Director of Shea FinTech, and Lee McNabb, Head of Payments Strategy at NatWest Group. Welcome all, great to have you all with us today. Now, before we get the discussion underway and start firing some questions at you, I'd just like to let you, the audience, know that we'll be running a poll throughout this panel debate. You should see that sort of come up on the side of your screens shortly, so please do vote. And the question we're asking you is, what do you think it will take to make open banking fulfill its potential? Perhaps you think we need complete open banking reform, more emphasis on consumer awareness, more customer-centric use cases, or maybe you think open banking won't fulfill its potential, but open finance will. And we'll come to the results of that poll towards the end of today's debate and get perhaps a couple of panelists to comment on their thoughts of the results there. But let's get underway with the main discussion now. And I want to start by assessing where open banking in the UK and Europe is in terms of reach and the roadmap as set out by the OBE in the UK anyway. Alex, let's come to you if we can. Are the foundations firmly in place, do you think? And what, if any, gaps are there that need plugging?
I think as a general principle, we've done extremely well to build out the level of complexity and offering that as an industry we've managed to deliver over the past 2 or 3 years. I actually think the answer differs if you look at the foundational products that open banking delivers in the variance between AIS and PIS. I think if you look at AIS use cases, fundamentally the complexity of the data sharing, the aggregation and the information value has grown exponentially. I think PIS, there's still some way to go. I think if you look at the OBE original roadmap, that was talking about a number of things, whether it be refunds, whether it be variable recurring payments, as early as 2017. And, we're still here in 2021 with a roadmap to completion. So I think the answer of how well we're fulfilling the roadmap is a slightly varied one, depending on the use case. But I think when we look at the option of things like variable recurring payments or refunds, there's still a fair way to go. I think then in terms of how that moves forward and how we as an industry try and tackle that, we just need to identify ways to deliver existential consumer or end user value. And I think that will ultimately drive, and it's almost now for us as an industry to take that implementation entity and its word and drive that forward as opposed to be prescribed to.
Okay, Jason, can I come to you? Do you agree there with what Alex has said, and do you see any gaps that need plugging, perhaps, given that the OBIE is nearing the end of its roadmap?
Sure, I think that for me the gap is always in has always been here in the approach rather than in the the intention or the end goal or what have you. Is that where I see the gap is that in order to foster innovation and encourage more, more change, more consumer value through open banking and into open finance, what we need is continual change. We need to be able to move towards a scenario where there are regular updates to people's, to various APIs that are publicly facing and allow transfer, customers to transfer their data from one place to another with ease. And I think that it's very much at the moment fairly static, the APIs, and that doesn't allow for good innovation in a software sense. You need to have the APIs not constantly changing, that's too much, but reasonably regularly, new versions updated, new ideas, new concepts put in. At least, backwards compatible changes should be made reasonably regularly. And I don't think we're there yet with, many, with certainly not with open banking APIs, and probably not with many publicly facing APIs. But that's what we'll need in order to support the growth of new products, new ideas, new ways of doing things, and to encourage the sort of competition that we need. So I think that's what we're lacking at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Lee, let's bring you in here and find out what you think and whether we're sort of truly seeing a return on investment yet.
Cool, thank you, Elliot. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So I think the chaps have probably covered it. I think the simple answer for me is a lot of the building blocks are there, so there's more that needs to be done. And I don't think we can ignore that these things take time to embed, right? And I come at this from a payments perspective, and I know Alex covered the AISP and the PISP piece. But from a payments perspective, open banking has often been compared to, say, contactless, for example, and its adoption curve. And in some ways that makes sense, but in others, I don't think it does. And Ellie, you talk about return on investment, and these things are long-term returns on investment. It's not benefit in year one or year two, for example. And there are certain similarities. I mean, we can't deny that contactless took a while to embed. I think, for example, now we see more contactless payments in an hour than we did in the first 6 months post its launch in 2010. And if we go back to the time of launch, there were real detailed business case debates about the wisdom and need of adding functionality like that to the likes of credit cards, similar to what we're doing now with open banking. But whilst I think those similarities are important, actually, in essence, open banking is that you don't necessarily know you are using it in many aspects. I think that's one of the key elements. We talk about return on investment and benefit, but it's not always obvious. With contactless, you're making an overt choice, and people talk about the TFL moment for open banking, but I don't think it will be one specific thing for open banking to embed. I think it will be multiple use cases. And I think the pandemic, to bring it to that, and the increased digital adoption will help with those building blocks in place. I mean, Alex mentioned VRP, etc., and we'll talk about that a bit later. But more and more adults are now adopting digital payment. I think over a third of the population have done that in the past 12 months. The API ecosystem is growing. The number of calls has almost gone from, I think, 70 million in 2018 to 6 billion in 2020, and it continues to grow. We've now got 300 plus strong fintechs that are involved in this ecosystem. So it's in its infancy. Some of the building blocks are there, more are needed, but there are some real opportunities to embed further in our lives.
Okay, thanks, Lee. And Anna, I want to bring you in here to offer something of a European perspective, because I know we've kind of focused there on the UK and the OBIE. So can you give us a little bit of a picture there, if you like, of Europe and where it is on its open banking journey?
Thank you, sure. Indeed, what we see is that it has been almost 2 years since the deadline of September 2019 with PSD2. And what we see in Europe is like that we've lived through a first stage marked by immaturity. And I think it's easy to understand that everything was very new for all players, how to connect to each bank, what information would it provide. So we didn't have any other open banking regulation before PSD2. And also, the implementation of PSD2 wasn't finished in 2019. We as bank have been just making implementations and new developments till 2000, the end of 2020, and even the beginning of this year. And this, for example, we have introduced new functionalities such as the couple biometric authentication or information on periodic and scheduled transfers. So I think PSD2 it's the beginning of an evolution of learnings for all players, and it's not finished. And however, overall, I'm more positive, I think, than Alice. I think the progress is being quite accurate. PSD2 is having a positive impact on innovation in the financial sector, and here we have seen that there has been a boost in the number of licensed and registered TPPs at European level, tripling in 2020 the figures of 2019, according to EBA. So it's true that the UK has been a forerunner in number of issued licenses, like with 173, but the rest of the EU has caught up with 2,007 new licenses in 2020. And if we take a look also globally, because I think open banking has a global influence, what we see globally is that in 2018, there were like only 24 entities having a developers portal. And in 2020, 2 years later, more than 300 banks were offering an API market with over 200 different services. So I think PSD2 APIs are only a small part of all these services that banks now offer. And if we take a closer look, it's like that. It's like only 9% of those 200 services are PSD2 based services. So I think, and I agree with Lee, we are seeing quite interesting use cases from new players, neobanks, and also traditional banks coming to the market. And all in all, this benefits the customers, and it's the customers who needs and the evolving needs of the customers at high speed, and also the influence of the pandemic, what is boosting or pushing forward open banking right now.
Just want to stay with you actually, Anna, because at the moment, as we've alluded to, there is for some a lack of resources that's holding some organisations back from that open banking adoption. And obviously, it is crucial that this is something that's kind of an industry-wide has industry-wide adoption. So what needs to happen, do you think, to ensure it is truly open and to make it more of a level playing field as open banking hopefully moves on to open finance, and maybe even beyond that to what we might call sort of open life, as it were?
Yeah, I think when we talk about open banking in Europe in general, we tend to think only on PSD2 and the services it regulates. But it's true that PSD2 is the starting point of an open financial ecosystem. And this includes open finance, open data, and coming to our open life, that you mentioned. I think PSD2, as I said before, has been quite positive because it has managed to make APIs known. So both from financial institutions that have been forced to develop infrastructures and also have realized the potential of open banking in doing that, and as well to business clients and third parties who see the possibility to develop new business models and integrating financial services in their solutions. And in this sense, I think we as society, we face different challenges, and here I would highlight two. I think one is something you almost mentioned. We have an open data challenge, and although we welcome regulations such as PSD2 or a fintech law in Mexico, I think it would be even richer if a global regulatory framework was created with common rules between regions, sectors, that encourage a greater exchange of all data that each user consents to share in a standardized way and also in real time, like we do in PSD2. Because transactional data is only one part of users' data. So in PSD2 regulated services are only 3 services of all the financial services or services the users use in their day-to-day. So if it were accompanied by a global data portability regulatory framework with common rules between sectors and regions, it will create, I think, a true level playing playing field. And I think this would be a differentiating factor for all actors to create really business models in real time, in putting the value in data and enrich individual and company solutions.
Okay, thank you. And let's bring Lana in at this point. Lana, do you agree there with what Anna said? And is there anything you want to add about how we can create that sort of level playing field?
Level playing field is a good kind of a social purpose. Sometimes it works or not. I think there should be a balance, right, for open banking to move to open finance or open data or open life, right? To start with, to make it work, you need to get outside of banking. And also, both in Europe and UK, pretty much agree with what Anna is saying. There's an initial effort to build infrastructure and align industry on a common purpose, led us to what we have today, and we have various options to build future products. But one consistent failure that I think when we're talking about adoption, I think from industry perspective, we need to focus on different type of customer. We shouldn't be focusing on consumers when we talk about open banking. We should be focusing on businesses that create amazing products for consumers. We should be using the drive, the common purpose on the industry to think about interoperability, think about introducing common standards, think about maintaining the resilience, sustainability, and security of this new market infrastructure that is being developed, rather than thinking what new products we need to launch for consumers. That should be commercial. That should be managed by various businesses. And as an industry, we need to be a little bit more eco-friendly and embrace other players, not just banking and finance players, for the benefit of consumers, to bring financial services to consumer, not expect consumer to come to the banks. We've seen I think there are a number of learnings for us to take from open banking evolution we had so far, but also from other industries. We're all using email today, right? And it's all interoperable, and we don't really think when we send email from Yahoo to Google Mail to Outlook or whatever, but it's a set of common standards that drives that interoperability. So pretty much what Anna was referring to, the global frameworks that would help to drive that interoperability for financial services industry, but also for others to play in this area. And reality is digital economy, is a platform economy, API economy is really driving to that. So those players who will be not necessarily embracing the future will be left behind. And we see, incumbents as well as new emerging players starting to shape their new structures, creating embedded finance, talking about things like bank as a service, platform as a service, and as a type of business models. So it is, striking the balance between the commercial reality, open market, and what needs to be driven by regulatory force.
Thank you, Lana. Some really interesting points there, and it does bring me nicely onto my next question. Just before I do so, though, thanks everyone in the audience who's sending plenty of questions in for our panel. We do have some time towards the end of our hour where I will be posing as many of those questions as possible to the panelists. So, as I say, do keep sending those in. Thanks for all your questions so far. And the poll is still running, so vote for that as well. Something that Lana just mentioned there was regulation. Jason, I'm going to come to you first on this, but do you think increased regulation could be the answer? And if so, how? What should it look like? Or do you think it runs the risk of hindering innovation, which I know some people have voiced concerns about regulation doing that in the past?
Yeah. Indeed, I think the first person to voice concerns about regulation hindering innovation was probably a Roman general. It's a constant claim that it will do that. I think regulation is required, and I think where it's required is in the area of consumer protection. Specifically, how do you protect a consumer when you have a situation where you have many different players in a network, many different businesses connected up, and the consumer is getting services from all of them? If you have a situation where, I go to the supermarket, for example, to use a current embedded finance example, I go to the supermarket, buy some goods, tap my card on the contactless payment machine, and something goes wrong. Whose fault is that? Is it the card provider? Is it the bank? Is it the supermarket? Where's the problem lie? And what you don't want to get is in a situation where the consumer has to work out where the problem lies and phone round trying to get refunds and that sort of thing from everyone. They ideally shouldn't have to do anything. A fault should be fixed in negotiation between the parties. And I think that's what I'm not entirely sure how you would achieve that with regulation, but I think that's what the regulation needs to do. It needs to put the onus on all the players involved in the network and to get together and say, right, how do we fix this problem for the consumer to stop essentially a situation where all of the players in this open finance network just pointing the finger at each other and go, well, it's their fault, everything's fine on our end, it's their problem, and buck passing round and round. That does no good for the consumer. And I think the reason that's necessary is I think that's necessary for innovation to actually flourish. It's all very well coming up with ideas, but in order for those ideas to actually be persistent, you need to have people using them. And at the moment, people aren't using them because they're concerned about security. They're concerned about the resilience of the systems and so on, and they're hanging back and sort of moving away from that. I think another thing which I would love to regulate but can't, would love to wave a magic wand and make disappear, is the constant claim from incumbents that there is a balance to be struck between innovation and resilience and security, and that these two things are constantly in balance, and you can't increase innovation without decreasing resilience and security. This is a refrain so constant that it has made its way from the mindset of the incumbent banks into the other finance players and into the consumer's mindset. And I think it's wrong. I think you can have both at the same time, and you need to design a system where these two things are not in balance, but they are self-reinforcing, that you can achieve both at once. And I think that insisting that is the mindset that you have to adopt is another way that we can increase innovation and increase the good and benefit for consumers. So those are the two, one regulatory, one non-regulatory approaches I would take to increasing this.
Thanks, Jason. And I think it would be a good point to bring Lee in here. I did see you nodding along a couple of points there, Lee. What are your thoughts here on regulation? Do you agree with anything that Jason just said?
I agree with some. As an incumbent, I guess I disagree politely with others. There's not much to add to what Jason so articulately covered, to be fair. Massive agreement, let's be clear. Standards matter at an industry level as they help drive a common direction for the industry. I don't think increased regulation necessarily hinders innovation. I think that's then a question that should be levied at the culture and the mindset of the organization. If you think about it, we as an incumbent bank, we very much looked upon open banking PSD2 as an opportunity, and have actually been first to the market with a payment related product because of that approach. Granted, it hasn't always been an easy journey. I feel where I slightly disagree is the balance bit. I think you can do both, and I think that's the very definition of balance, right? We do more than 1 in 4 payments in the UK. If we didn't keep resiliency at the forefront of our mind, then ultimately the UK and its systemic impact would be fairly significant, to be fair. But that hasn't stopped us being innovative and kind of first to market. So I think it is a balance, but it's very much on the provider to make sure that they don't lose sight of that innovation and that customer need, because that's ultimately what we're all here for. We are here to serve those customer needs and meet the outcomes of, to Lana's point, all our customers, not just the retail base, but our commercial base, right the way from micro enterprises all the way up to kind of large tier one corporates. And this whole regulatory evolution is kind of ongoing within the OBIE circles now. I mean, Alex mentioned earlier VRP. It's non-mandated at the moment, but at the end of the day, we need those common standards at industry level for us to be able to kind of drive it forward. If we are left to our individual devices, then I'm not sure we would see it as rapidly as we would like to see it.
Okay, I'll stick with you. Oh, sorry, do chip in, Alex.
Well, I was just going to follow on from that, and I think this is Lee's point in terms of where's the opportunity versus where's the need for us to evolve the process. I think when we look at VRP specifically, most financial institutions have access to back system and a direct debit functionality. So from a technical standpoint, what's the rationale for that innovation? I think when you look at what we need to do as an industry, I think there's been some poignant points around complexity of consumer rights and arbitration and management of ownership of that. But whilst we have no obligation to innovate, it's very easy, whether you're a small financial institution or a large one, to prioritize budgets and resource to those other areas of your business. So I think there's a need for us to take a step back from the principles of the regulation and focus on what we as an industry want the ecosystem to look like from a consumer protection perspective, from a business protection perspective, but also from a convenience and experience perspective, which I think historically we've less focused on. It's been a transaction from A to B as opposed to the experience that one gets with that process.
I think it's sticking with you. Of course, yeah.
If I can add here, I think throughout the globe, we see different approaches. We see regulatory-driven approaches in the EU, in UK, in Mexico, in Turkey, or in Australia, but we have also market-driven approaches in other geographies, like market coordination in Japan, Hong Kong, on recommendations by regulators in Singapore, or even initiatives promoted by the industry in New Zealand or Colombia. So we see in Asia, where market-driven approach is the most common approach, we see a high evolution of open banking. So what I think is that regulation is always, in my opinion, a step slower than innovation. So I think the truly benefit of regulation would be to establish this level playing field, so the foundations, so that the market-driven approach can satisfy all these customers' needs, as Lee said. And I think this user needs is what is pushing all the services and all the solutions and integrated solutions in their day-to-day ecosystem forward. So we see open banking as a natural evolution of the distribution models of banks and an enabler of partnership within sectors. And I think it's a fact that there are ecosystems are being created where users expect their financial services to be integrated to have a convenient experience and a real-time experience to satisfy their needs.
Yeah, so I think, just kind of building on Anna's point, the efforts, the investment efforts from the industry had to be, and to Lee's point before, if we were trying to get to the common ground, perhaps it would be more difficult to achieve, especially in the markets like Europe and UK, very already complex, layered financial services market with different purposes and objectives from various private and public institutions. But also moving forward, there's a number of things that need to be addressed in open banking ecosystem. One is, we kind of talked quite a bit about the standards and interoperability and other players, but there are other bits, right? With COVID, the use of digital payments versus cash accelerated significantly. in most cases, digital payments happening through the card rails. And it's not necessarily the most innovative and most modern rails, but they're extremely reliable and they're fully protected. So creating this new type of rails, API rails, that may be much more kind of future 21st centuries compatible, but are we creating a new set of standards for that rails, right? So there's the scheme type of rules. We don't have to replicate what the card rules have and card schemes have, because they were designed for different technology, for different times and for different players. But those type of things, the new consumer protections, various kind of level playing field from that point of view to protect the ecosystem, to guard ecosystem, to help to drive the performance of the ecosystem and this new market infrastructure. All those items that I expect to be supported and driven from regulatory perspective. But somehow we are really looking on what I personally see it's a market development, the new features, new be more commercial, that need to be more open to market, not forced by regulator. And I think that's the balance I mentioned in my kind of initial comments. That's a balance still to be struck, definitely in UK and Europe, where there is a kind of next iteration shift. We're still talking about implementation entities, where we need to start thinking about running market infrastructure.
Thank you, Lana, and thanks everyone. Great to get all your perspectives there. Actually, I want to kind of ask Lee more about sort of open banking payments. I was wondering, do you think, as with open banking, that open finance will have an increased impact on payments and new payment initiatives will come to light as a result? And if so, what might that sort of look like?
Thanks, Ellie. So yeah, I think the simple answer is yes, it will. It links to the point I made earlier. I think organically we'll see growth, driven, I think, probably by some of the key drivers that shape the entire market. Right? There's probably only 3 or 4, but we've discussed the regulation and an industry drive. More products will be brought into scope. We've mentioned VRP quite a bit and how that can build and potentially impact traditional payment types. There's a competitive lens, more participants and more propositions come to the market, and Anna covered that perfectly in terms of that growth. And then ultimately the customer and the use case. As more customers use open banking and understand the benefits of account to account payments, I think we'll see that growth. But back to my point earlier, we almost don't want them to be thinking about open banking. And I think a good example is look at the recently announced news in the UK about tax payments to the government. Self-assessment can be made directly for open banking. But when you go on to make your payment, it just says pay from your bank account. The customer doesn't know they're using open banking. We've touched a bit on protections here, and yes, protections are vitally important, but some of the use cases for open banking don't need protection. They don't need that interchange type structure. It's not always kind of applicable in different scenarios. And again, back to my point about the differences between this and contactless. But as it evolves, just to be banking, I think there'll be multiple payment use cases that come more to the fore. It'll allow aggregators such as kind of payroll providers to make payments directly to employees. So it may impact traditional payments like BACS. For retail users, it'll enhance real-time payments. So kind of really going head to head with those card schemes, as Lana mentioned there, just to enable instant transactions between retailers and consumers. And I think you can see from the moves that the likes of Visa and MasterCard have been making in the market in terms of acquisition and new products, they recognize that as well. Not to be the sales pitch, but we've done it ourselves, our own pay it proposition, award-winning, thank you, Adam and team. Faster, safer, lower cost, better UX. We want it to be as simple as buying your bagel from the shop. You can use open banking or you can use a card. Think also about bringing the ecosystem together. how can we bring different overlay services, such as maybe request to pay, and that links to VRP. It has a real potential to revolutionize invoicing and bill payments. And then further down the line, there's no reason why, we've talked about Europe and the global impact here, there's no real reason why this couldn't be applied cross-border, linked with the increasing adoption of real-time payments across the globe. What open banking, what APIs do is just ultimately set those standards to bring that all together. So it has a deep well of benefits. And I've not even mentioned data there. I know Anna mentioned data earlier. The kind of wealth of data that open banking will bring to us and our customers is evident, to be fair. Back to my one point to close, every customer has different needs and every provider should kind of look to meet them. And arguably open banking and its evolution can just make a huge difference across so many of those value chains and experiences for those customers.
Alex, let's come to you. Lee painted quite a picture there about kind of all the various different ways in which open banking payments are kind of innovating and being developed. What do you have to add here?
Well, it's very difficult to follow on from that, I think. But I think the point that Lee makes, which is extremely pertinent, is that you're now using non-financial service products to make payments and move money around the country, the globe. And I think what open banking gives the opportunity to do is embed or create that seamless nature of, if I'm using WhatsApp to talk to you, I can then use my open banking rails to transact and send you money for the pizza over the weekend. Or, I think the nature of which we consume financial services will evolve to such that it becomes a convenient part of our life as opposed to a necessary sort of premeditated part of the process. And I think actually, I keep harping back to the consumer, but we expect things more readily available, quicker, more data centric, more immediate. And I think the nature of that, then being able to do that within the application I'm using, as opposed to moving into my banking app or whatever that may be, is only going to drive more mass adoption. And then I think in terms of the interoperability piece, we see the EPI, how that will shape up over the next few months, I'm not sure, but there are obvious regional focuses on delivering real-time payments as sort of in a ubiquitous nature. And I'm as yet to find, outside of SWIFT, which is relatively expensive and relatively slow, a good way of moving money around the globe in a seamless, sort of safe, secure manner. So I think the ability to start to entwine these services and systems, whether that be through regulation or technical standards, is something that we should also look out for.
And Alex, just sticking with you, actually, I want to kind of bring in SMEs. We've talked a lot about consumers, of course. So are the right services in place to help SMEs benefit from open banking, do you think? And if not, what needs to be done to change this?
I think there's probably a country by country answer here, or certainly region by region answer. So I don't think I can give you an umbrella yes or no. I think when we look back at the principles of what PSD2 was designed to do, it was supposed to be the ability for the many to access the financial services system rather than the few. It was supposed to democratize, both from a technical and economic standard, the access to payments infrastructure. I'm not sure that is there yet at an SME level. We've talked a lot about consumers today, and that probably shows the industry focus and lean towards delivering an end user experience rather than SME experience. But then to Lee's point around taxation, or the ability to start to manage your payroll products, I think the use cases are starting to be built. So I'm not necessarily saying change needs to happen to make SME use cases successful. I think the focus and the innovation will now stem from the ability to deliver a consumer use case into a more business focused one.
Okay.
Just maybe to build on that point and to build on Alex's earlier point on the customer needs and serving the kind of part of the life journey and part of the customer journey, and bringing finance to that movement of embedded finance or invisible finance is really taking quite a rapid growth across the globe. What is interesting, while the kind of middle layer of the service is evolving to serve customer needs better, the foundational layer is still very complex. And again, to Alex's point, that moving money cross-border But actually, for businesses moving money domestically, it's extremely expensive and extremely lengthy process. It is still very fragmented and layered. And it is still kind of clearing and settlement still dominant by large players, which also expose their customers to various capital risk because they're also lenders, they also compete with their customers. It's a whole upgrade of the foundational layer to enable that more seamless, simplified and positive journey in real life. Yet to be addressed, and open banking ecosystem has a role to play in interoperability with other players there as well.
Thanks, Lana. Jason, I wanted to get some of your thoughts on SMEs here. Did you want to add anything on that?
Sure. Yeah, I think that the key point to remember with SME finance and banking is that it's a degree more complicated than what is provided for consumers, and I think the initial focus on of open banking PSD2 was on the consumers, as has been said, and I think that now we need to work out what additional changes, additional layers, additional functionality is needed for the SMEs to be able to interact in that sort of that much more low cost, much more access services much more easily and cheaply than they currently do. This requires a lot more innovation of the APIs, a lot more change in the APIs to enable that additional functionality, building on what has already been done. So I don't think that we're anywhere near finished yet, even just for open banking, because we need to enable SMEs to access the same functionality, because they are they have a lot of there's a lot of need for them to drive the economy. They do a lot of driving of the underlying economy. So we need to enable them we need to remove the barriers from them for essentially by putting all this functionality in. This innovation requires the APIs to change a lot, right? We need to be able to make changes to the APIs to enable all this functionality, and make changes to them and the systems while they're still running for other players. And this brings me back to the innovation versus resilience point, that you cannot set these two things against each other. If you have a system where these two things have to be held in balance with one another and weighed up against one another, then it's going to fail, because you're going to always slow your innovation down to try and maintain your resilience. And it's only with a system that makes sure that these two things can be gotten at the same time, and that you can advance both and increase both at the same time, that you will be able to create functionality that delivers what is needed for the consumer, be that a business or an individual.
Okay, let's as you mentioned
sorry,
there.
Just quite quick,
sorry.
if I can add here, I think APIs in open banking is democratizing the access of SMEs to services and real-time solutions that were once restricted to multinationals and large companies, because they needed quite a lot of cost to integrate with directly with financial institutions. And what we see now is that SMEs have access to those services to integrate financial services in their ERPs, although they are smaller. And it's true what you said, that all of you, Jason, as well, that traditionally many use cases are related to retail customers, that PSD2 is more focused on retail customers. But I think open banking brings big opportunities also for businesses. And we, in our case at BBVA, we have a success case with Ant Group, the AliExpress home company. And what we've partnered with them is to collaborate on the integration of financial services of cross-border payments and financing in the blockchain platform. And these are services for SMEs, and their aim is to reduce the bureaucratic effort that SMEs face today in this cross-border trade, and to facilitate the financing of international trade operations with more transparency and real-time access. So I think there is a big opportunity for SMEs, and I see use cases in the market as well coming forth without the regulatory intervention.
Okay, great. And I did want to ask some of you for a bit of for your view really on what is next in terms of open banking reform in the UK and more widely into Europe as well. Actually, someone, one of the audience questions asks it much better than I would have done. So someone has asked, what is next after the OBIE to referee the open banking landscape in the UK? Alex, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah, I'll give it a go. I think we have now a focus on implementation first and foremost. So we understand that there are technical requirements to continue that process. I think to split that answer into sort of several parts, I think at some point we need to identify open banking as payments innovation and not necessarily segment it in its own right. We're talking about a number of facets of an SME or user's journey within the payments infrastructure, and at some point we need to incorporate that into our wider strategies. We still have those gaps we've talked to today, so that the immediate focus needs to be around arbitration, consumer rights, and how we deliver innovation. And I think if you tackle those with technical focus, you ultimately encourage innovation. So I would suggest that's probably where our focus goes next. In terms of how that looks at a regulatory or technical landscape level, I think we've covered that today in terms of the appetite or appeal of a global regulatory framework would ultimately allow us to move in a cohesive manner. We ultimately don't want to end up as member states trying to find a way to collaborate, at a latter stage of our evolution.
Okay, Jason, what are your thoughts on what's next for open banking reform? Perhaps not just in the UK, but covering wider Europe as well.
Yeah, I think that the where it's going is we've covered a lot of it already. We're going to start asking questions about how this can be used to benefit SMEs. Firstly, how we can make the payment rails more efficient, cheaper, better payment rails work for them. That's a big question I think is going to pop up. There's also interoperability between different countries, as has been mentioned. How do I move money from one country to another? That is still very difficult, too difficult in my opinion. We also do need, perhaps not a TFL moment, but we need something that makes open banking a mainstream concern. Perhaps not a mainstream concern in the sense that open banking is on every consumer's lips, that they know exactly what it is. But in the same way that consumers use RFID chips every day without actually knowing what they are, the same thing will become true of open banking, right? They will end up using services that use open banking every day without actually knowing what they are. And it will get to the point where a bank or financial service that says, that they don't really use open banking or they don't really have a connection to it will be like a bank that says, well, we can't really offer you a debit card, or we can't offer you a contactless debit card. Consumers will start saying, well, why on earth would I use you then? So that's the sort of roadmap I see for the mass adoption of open banking or open finance.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Let's go to another question that's come in from an audience member. Anna, I think you're best placed to answer this one. They've asked, do you think that there's open banking resistance or kind of slower adoption from larger multinationals because of the different global regulations?
I think, yes, what we see with our clients is that they are quite keen of PSD2 here in Europe, but then they ask, what do I do in Latin America, for example, where we have a lot of presence? Can we use the same services like account information and payment initiation there? So I think the need of a global regulatory framework is quite necessary, because they have, with the different regulations we have right now in throughout the globe, we cannot offer global solutions to our clients, which is what we are seeking, because I think we have to understand that in the regulators as well, that digital means global, and in the current technological environment, a thorough review of regulation and homogeneity at the international level is necessary. Although it is something that I understand that is quite complex, authorities have the challenge of designing and implementing this regulatory framework that really offers a standardization throughout the globe and supports innovation while maintaining an adequate degree of protection of all players and giving opportunities to all actors. But it's true that it's a demand that we're having of clients, and we have to start thinking that we live in a digital environment and this is a global environment. Regulation needs to be global.
And that's very
Okay,
good point.
thanks.
I think open banking general in UK and across the globe have an opportunity to become systemic entity in the financial services ecosystem. So there are a number of global organizations that are trying to create that harmonization of rules for a digital economy. And I haven't seen open banking on their agenda or top of their agenda. So really, to make a global framework, those parties that already exist, they need to start adding open banking to their agenda and bringing it to that level. But if I started even domestically in UK, we're yet to move to that recognition that what we build in open banking infrastructure, it is really market infrastructure and need to be managed like that. Back to my earlier point, we still have, we still need to move from implementation to the running mode to enable. And to my knowledge of European market is very similar dynamics.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and let's go to another question, actually, because hopefully that has answered that question for our audience member. We've had another great one that's come in, and Jason, I think you're well placed to answer this one, and then Lee perhaps can jump in. What is the best approach to educate and prove trust and security to the consumers of open banking and open finance? Jason.
Yeah. This is going to sound like a rather odd answer at first. For things to go wrong, now, that sounds a bit odd. Why would things going wrong prove trust? The reason is because what really proves trust is not things never going wrong, because no one really believes that any system is perfect and nothing goes wrong. It's when things go wrong, how do you solve the problem? How do you fix it? How do you make sure that the consumer is not inconvenienced and that the problem is corrected as quickly as possible? And that starts to improve trust in the security and resilience of the system, because then you've shown the consumer that if something does go wrong, that they're not going to be too badly affected. And that is a sort of real way of ensuring that people start to gather more trust and faith in the system, shall we put it like that? So I think it's really, you have to consider that things are going to go wrong with open banking and the open banking connections, and then work out what you're going to do to minimize customer impact. And I think that is the best way of educating people and demonstrating that they should have trust in these systems that connect all the various financial players together.
Okay, interesting. Perhaps, as you say, not the answer we were expecting. Lee, what do you think? What do you make of that?
I like that answer, to be fair. It's those moments of truth, as we call them, that I think a provider's benefit really comes to the fore for the consumer. I'd probably take it a step before that, before it even goes wrong. I think we need to, it's about the use case piece. It comes back to not educating the customer on open banking per se, but educating the customer on how we can meet their needs. How can we meet their outcomes that they want. They don't need to know, as I said earlier, that it's an API or open banking or open finance or whatever regulation that's driving it. We just need to let them know, look, we can serve this need for you by doing X and Y. And I think through those use cases, through increased adoption, that will naturally gain traction. That's how it works. That's how contactless gains adoption. I know we talked about, Jason mentioned the TFL moment, I mentioned it earlier. I think open banking is slightly different because there are multiple use cases. As people start using it for their tax payments, they'll look for options alternative elsewhere. When they see, oh, I can pay with this from my bank account because they've used it elsewhere, that trust will almost organically grow, and it will be linked to the inherent trust they have with the provider. So it's probably one step before Jason's answer, but I do like the moment of truth angle.
Great, yeah, thank you, Lee. And let's go through the poll results because they can sometimes throw up something interesting. We asked, what do you think it will take to make open banking fulfill its potential? 9% said complete open banking reform. 35% said the emphasis on consumer awareness. 52% actually said more customer-centric use cases, and only 4% said it won't fulfill its potential. Alex, I know we're coming to the final few minutes, but what do you make of those results, in particular that 52% who want more customer-centric use cases?
Yeah, I want to tackle the 35 first, I think, actually, because I think that point of inherent trust with the institution providing the service is a really interesting point. And that sort of emphasis on consumer awareness, I think a lot of the topic of conversation today has been around the seamless invisibility of the nature of the payment itself and that inherent attachment to the trust of the financial institution providing or TPP providing that service. So I think in terms of the consumer awareness piece and it follows on from the answer before a little bit. I think we have an obligation to ensure that the industry and the players within that are aware of the inherent risk and opportunity. And de facto, if they are then providing a product or service to their end user, that trust level should be attached to that. So I think that's an interesting one because it, for me, sits within the industry in terms of consumer awareness and emphasis as opposed to the end user themselves. I think then in terms of more customer-centric use cases, I agree. I think what we've talked to today is around laying the foundations for innovation and the sort of matches that we require to light those fires. And I think we will only see that as open banking becomes finance and open data and open life, that integration between your everyday life and the need for a financial transaction will ensure that a customer-centric use case happens. I think our success as an industry is not that we've made an open banking transaction, it's that that person has purchased or had an experience, whether that be in a retail store or with their friends, and happened to have made a transaction as a byproduct of that. You know, the more unknown we are in that process, I think the more success we have ultimately garnered as a process.
Great, thank you, Alex. Thanks so much for those of you who voted in the poll and all of those audience members who sent questions in for our panel. I just want to thank our panelists, of course, Alex, Anna, Jason, Lana and Lee, for a really lively discussion. I think we covered off a lot there. Special thanks, of course, to our sponsor, Tribe Payments. And finally, thank you for watching. We hope you've enjoyed the debate today. For the latest on open banking and open finance, visit openbankingexpo.com. This panel debate will be available to watch back on demand. Goodbye for now.